Hello hero, it's Lucy Lannon. This life right here is your DIY custom built ultra personalised and aesthetic epic. So let's write some mythical magnificence together so that you can live it up and soak it in differently to how you did yesterday. And our particular angle on that today is using this, the Buffy tarot deck, which has finally arrived at my house, to do a friendship reading of some kind. I don't really know what kind. I guess we'll see as we go. I'm really enjoying doing these random collective readings, so if you do like them, please hit me up in the comments saying, I prefer this style of thing. Or if indeed you prefer my long-winded pick-a-piles, then also go to those videos and say, I prefer this style of thing, and I will do whatever it is that you want, my little Chucky egg, because this is kind of your channel also. The reason I'm using a Buffy deck for this is because I was one of those ancient people that was watching Buffy as it aired, so I think I saw the trailer and was very enticed by both demonology and knee-high boots at the tender age of 10. And then it sort of aired shortly after that, and all of my kind of moving through high school type friendships were Buffy fans, or kind of based around talking about different things we were seeing, and I was only a few school years different to the Buffster, so for me, like, friendships, whether developing or in adulthood, are all tied in with Scooby-gangness. And indeed, of my friends that have like been surviving friendships, long-term people, a lot of the people I've known since I was like 4 or 5 seem to be Buffy fans, just by coincidence, so there's that. Anyway, that's why I'm using this one. Also, it's great. There will be one of my like 60-second review videos on this in more depth if you're a Buffy fan and you want to see what the deck's like from both a Buffy and a tarot perspective. But today we're just going to look into, I want to say, one interpersonal connection you've got, because that's sort of the way I read. I deep dive into one-on-one things because that's how I think as a person. But equally, this could also be about a group, so we'll just kind of see what comes up. Let's have a... Oh, you want to come out, do you? Let's have a neb. Should I take one more and then... Yeah? 2 more, okay. Well, I can't take all of you, so we'll take the one that's flipped. And then one more. All right. Crikey. I haven't really got a sense of the personality of this deck yet, but I'm enjoying that it's chatty right here, right now. You are a sneaky 2, so let's clarify one with the other, shall we? This has been very significant for me in what I've pulled from this deck so far, so that's interesting. Da, da, da. I'm going to say that you belong under you. Are we meant to take 2 more for this? 2 of these, right, okay. So we're using my DIY love deck, which isn't always for love and isn't entirely present for the moment, just because before I started filming this, I had a private love reading, and that deck, due to the person we were reading about, it kind of scattered all over the floor, and I thought, well, I'll use half of it for the friendship reading, because whatever remains is meant to be there. So these are statements which may or may not pertain to friendship. Yep, see what I mean? But are just sort of indicators for me of what's going on. You want to come out as well, don't you? Ooh, okay. There's a bit of rivalry going on, I see. And then we'll get 2 that I'm going to flip in a minute from the top of the deck to sort of talk about this in depth. Okay, 2 seconds while I meditate on this, then maybe a cut which you won't feel. Okay, for many of you, this is a one-on-one thing, which I'm kind of relieved about, because I don't read as well about groups. Or it's not that I don't read as well, it's just that I prefer, like I say, the deep dive. I think the Buffster in this case is you, and then this person that we're talking about is Anya, but any gender, and kind of you take your situation as far as you see fit, because this is a general reading for a lot of people. But the overall situation here is that I feel someone you're close to or were close to is judging you a little bit because you stepped back, right? For many of you, this is someone who you have a lot in common with, because the magic box for me is sort of representative of places, particularly hangouts, but also just areas of interest which are quite niche and which you have in common with a friend, and a friendship is built around it. So this makes it kind of okay and semi-relevant that I ranted about Buffy whilst shuffling this deck, because it's again like something not everybody has in common, but when you do have it in common, there's like this open world for you to, open world might be a key phrase, but there's this world to kind of build on between you. For many of you, because I use that phrasing, I'm getting that you used to game with this person, whether that be like LARPing, board games, or kind of online stuff, but it's like you had a literal world in common. And I get for many of you, there was a physical space and a digital space that you used to hang out in. And these two things were pretty key. But you've taken a step back, not necessarily from the friendship, but just from everything, to kind of have a rest for a bit. And this person is not taking it well, right? I'm noticing this sign that says, please check all bags or backpacks at the counter. And what I'm hearing in my head is a phrase from an Offspring song that I was listening to at the time that Buffy aired, which said, check your baggage at the door, right? It's very like, I apologise if you're not into pop punk or anything, and I dare say that my tastes have diversified since then, but it's kind of indicative that this person couldn't check their own stuff in observing your decision. And also, I want to bear in mind with this that Anya is a vengeance demon, right? She's absolutely lovely in the present day, but she does have a past that is very vindictive and that sort of campaigns so hard for the rights of people that she gets into territory which is actually very non-ethical, which I think is relevant particularly for those of you on the younger side who might have friendships that are very strongly formed around identity politics and around protest or being against things rather than being for things, and sort of banding together in a much more, I want to say a much more healthy way outside of victim mentality, but that's not to say that I don't agree with campaigning for the rights of certain peoples or even animals or whatever. It's more that I think that there's a trend at the moment politically, which may expand to certain circles as well, of focusing on the negative in order to bring about a positive utopian ideal. And it may be that another of the things that you bonded with this, I want to say gaming friend on, is that you both fought for a certain idea, but fought is the operative word with this person. And I think they were maybe bringing some energy of some other resentment, some other things where they felt isolation, some other beef, I want to say, because it's a very Yorkshire word, into this thing. And the passion that you saw in them as a good person who fights for the rights of others may actually have been a little bit of displaced passion because they felt not so great about some other stuff. And that's it's not necessarily a judgment on them, because a lot of people are in that place and it can be channeled in a positive way, like protest, like activism. And I'm all for that. You know, I channeled some of my stuff into some very successful activism in recent years and ended up literally saving a life with one of the things. But it's more that, like, this is your confirmation of this is how you know it's that person, right? It's not about whether you agree or disagree with that modality and that trend. It's more that I'm giving you those specific circumstances because you go, that's my Anya, right? So this is a person who hasn't necessarily checked their baggage at the door, but who is a good person. I get from it being Anya as well that they're possibly quite financially successful, or successfully meeting their goals if you're a bit on the younger side. Please be 18 plus if you're watching my channel, but you know, it still applies. Yeah, they're very kind of efficient, even if they don't necessarily, even if they haven't intended to be in as direct a way as everyone else, because Anya is a character who needs to be inducted into the modern world. She's very up for chasing money. She's very self-sufficient, but she also needs the concept of money sort of explaining to her because she comes from the outside of it. So this may also be a person whose life is very abundant, very fortuitous, in a way that they didn't fully plan, or that they only have a 50-50 handle on, and they just seem to move through it in a very positive way, that sort of makes you look on and go, but how, though? So that, again, is your confirmation of who this person is. Although I suspect, to be honest, that you have a good idea of it because you're sensing a bit of beef, a bit of judgment from this person's corner. And what I want to go into is it's partly to do with the fact that you step back from things. Now, this may be stepping back from a community because we have the usual kind of Four of Swords church setting. And with Buffy being class protector and the imagery usually being of a knight, I want to say that, again, this could be stepping back from a gaming world, maybe like a D&D type universe, or from a community where you are fighting for something because it is a swords thing and because we've got this thing about activism and kind of identity politics veering into tribalism as a thing. Sorry if you hear a sound change, I was just standing up to make sure I was still on camera. So you've taken a step back from whichever of those worlds it is that you have in common with this friend, and you can see that they have a defensive posture. They are the judgment card. The judgment card is also about calling, so it's like they feel called to this thing, and there's a bit of resentment, a bit of beef in the fact that they perceive that you're no longer called to it. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's that you're very fucking tired and you need a rest, right? Buffy, as a character, carries more than anyone else in the show. And yes, she is high drama, and yes, that can be kind of uncomfortable for other people. But realistically, she is dealing with more than Anyanka, even if Anyanka is hundreds of years old, if not thousands. I can't even remember. I think she's thousands of years old. But yeah, there's this sense that, like, you've had a lot on your plate. You're pretty amiable in not discussing that, or pretty kind of easygoing in terms of getting on with the rest of the group and getting on with your mission, or indeed the mission of the group if we're talking literal missions, right? Quests, etc. But you've finally hit a point where you kind of can't deal with it anymore. You just need to fully rest. So yeah, there's a bit of pushback on that. There's a bit of, well, I'm staying in this environment that we sort of built together, or I'm staying in the hangout we have in common, and I'm doing so with a bit of animosity towards you, and you're picking up on that. I don't think this person is necessarily discussing you behind your back or anything shifty. I think it's just that they're giving you kind of, I nearly said evil eye, but I don't mean it in that sense, unless that's something you are picking up on. But they're giving you the stink eye, right? Their arms folded. They're like, what is it that you're playing at exactly? For a small number, this is a magical relationship because we have the magic box and I'm seeing all the pentacles and stuff. This is maybe somebody that you've done magical work with, and now you're pulling out of that entirely because it's the right time for you to rest and stay away from that stuff, or perhaps because you're doing a lot of dream work and you're exhausted when you wake up, which certainly, like, later on into being a witch or a magician, that happens for a lot of us. But yeah, it's not really fully being understood, okay? And I'm seeing the kind of trumpet of Gabriel being on the shelf in this, which, yes, it's a very clever thing for this particular deck to portray it in that way, but it's also like communication is halted with this person. They are no longer trying to call you. For some of you, they're no longer inviting you to stuff which used to be a group event, or they're no longer asking you to play the game or take part in, you know, the group organisation or the protest or whatever it is for you. Again, adapt as you see fit because large audience, but you're not invited anymore is what I'm getting. And I don't even think you've had time to feel annoyed or resentful about this in any real or big way, because you're just focused on resting up to be able to get back out there again with everything else that you're doing. I don't think you're this person's dream partner unless you are coming for a love reading, which is also a friendship. I think instead this is, they saw you as somebody who could share these things in a very intimate, very specific way. The Ace of Stakes is both somebody who will be a co-defender against what you mutually see as the forces of darkness, right? Whatever they are in the real world. But it's also an Ace of Wands, so it's also about shared creativity, shared drive, an idea that both of you are working on, possibly even a collaborative project for some of you around the worlds that you've built. Excuse me. Hiccups confirmation. So some of you, if you have come from a gaming world, a D&D world, a shared magical collective, anything sort of along the lines that I've already spoken about, it's almost as if you guys were gonna split off to an extent and do your own thing and kind of write something together or do something more specific. And that hasn't happened because you've just needed to kip. You've needed to rest. But you're not kipping on the relationship, and I think that's how this person is taking it. Now, this one's interesting. It's the Four of Pentacles, and it's the magic box being closed. Four of Pentacles is not being willing to share energy with somebody in some kind of a way. It's, again, this closed defensive body language. It's somebody saying, I have resources, but right now it feels safer for me to bury them in the ground or to keep them in my household and not distribute them. It can also be withholding love in a very literal sense. So you take it as you see fit. This person may be holding back in love, in material stuff, in just letting you into the game if this is a digital thing, right? That you may, for some of you, you're literally locked out of the Zoom room for this. And it's because this person is, I want to say, butthurt about what's gone on. But with the magic box being closed as well, this can also be that, like, there is a physical hangout which is closed to you. Because I'm seeing this magic box, but what I'm actually thinking of is the bronze, and the bronze being shut and the shutters being down. So this is, if you did used to go to a specific place to hang out in person, either that place is closed and you don't know. This is a really specific take, so it'll only hit for some of you. But for some of you, there's like a place that you used to go that only opens its doors at specific times. And I am in a couple of organizations or nights that operate like that, where it's like you get a heads up online or through a word of mouth group when we're open for business again, and you get some kind of secret location stuff, or you get some dates or whatever. And then the rest of the time, it's a very closed practice thing, because there are either people that would not want certain groups to gather, or it's like, we just want to limit the number of people that can enter in. And if that hits, I think you're locked out of whatever that is. I think you're no longer in the subscription feed for it, or this person used to be the way that you know how it's going on, right? Even if it's digital. So you literally can't take part, and that's this person's decision to ostracize you, to lock you out. It's a very Five of Pentacles kind of a feeling, even though we're in the Four. If it's not that, I just get the feeling you're avoiding certain hangouts and stuff because you know that this person might be there and that they're pissed off with you. Then there's this, do you compare as, am I better or worse? There is some kind of jealousy with this person, and I'm not altogether sure as of yet whether this is justified or not. They think that you've moved on and that's why you're withdrawing. And whether that's to like a better friend or a different hobby or a different hangout, or if you are, you know, magically practicing, it could be to a different kind of tier or coven of that. But from their perspective, part of why they're pissed off is that they think you've just ditched them for something else. And they're asking themselves whether that's something you compare one to the other. You know, it's quite a common thing within friendships for things that are very long-standing to have peaks and troughs when you also discover other friendship groups. And I'm of the mind that it's very healthy to have lots of different sets of friends, or indeed lots of individual one-on-one things from different locations, from different hobbies, from different bits of your life. And it's almost as if with some people, particularly if you're built like me, if you were to have all of those different groups, factions, or individuals in a room, they may fight amongst themselves. Because if you're an adaptable person, i.e. somebody who's drawn to something like tarot, and you have a pretty broad worldview, quite often you can be quite chameleonic. You can have a lot of different sorts of interests, And the people who are very diehard about each of those interests may not like each other. I've always kind of had the joke with one of my closest friends that if I ever got married or had like a big birthday bash or something, I wouldn't actually be able to invite everybody I know because they'd probably kill each other, right? It's that thing of all of these different people and groups work for me, but whether they work for each other in a really actually getting along way is up for debate. And I think perhaps because we were getting stuff about a very niche world with this person, they sense that whatever it is that they perceive you as moving on to, whether true or not, wouldn't necessarily be something they're compatible with or something they'd approve of. If you did come for a relationship reading and you're getting a friendship reading, and again, it's maybe one or two of you, this is a person who's saying, have you moved on? And if so, do you compare us because this person is probably very different to me? And is that more like what you want, right? But if it's not anything like that and you are coming for a friendship thing, because that's what I advertised as, this is, do you have friends that you prefer to me right now? Are you seeing our shared hobbies, interests, pursuits as something you've phased out of, right? I always think of phases with Buffy because I was an Oz person, right? He was my favourite for years and years. And now I'm older, I'm a Ripper person. But, you know, you live, you learn, and I guess you can figure out why that is from my job, right? But at the time, I was very into werewolves, I was very into Radiohead, I was very into the kind of hermit figure, and Oz was my bag, right? So I think of things that very much move in a lunar way. When I think of Buffy, I think of people having a changeable kind of a personality, going from one extreme to the other in very quick time, or indeed moving through phases in that teenage fashion where we kind of go through patches of experiencing or wanting different things. And indeed, when you think of Oz, you can't not think of Willow, and you can't not think of the fact that she had a phase where she dated guys, right? And it was a very key phase for her, but she ended up not identifying in that fashion. And what I'm getting from that analogy is that this person is worried that whatever brought you together may not be how you eventually identify. So that could be an LGBTQ++++ thing. It could be more of a kind of religious thing. It could be a gaming thing. It could be just very generally that the things that you were interested in, and remember I sort of referenced music I've since grown out of, right? But the things you bonded over, they're concerned that you're done with that, right? I don't know that that is the case with you. I think this is a projection. I think this is to let you in on what it is that this friend is thinking. And if you have moved on, I want to say, don't feel guilt about that, because it's, you know, without, to continue this very broad analogy, and I'm sorry if you're not a Buffy fan, but without Willow dumping Oz and eventually getting with Tara and then Kennedy, Oz would not have done his travelling thing where he essentially became a kind of monk and controlled his wolfishness, right? So I think it was necessary for all parties for that particular phase to be moved through, even if I am one of the diehard fans who will argue that Oz was never a redundant character and that Willow's probably closer to being bi than she is fully gay. But anyway, that's my over-identification bit done with. Essentially what you need to know from this is that this person is scared that you've kind of moved on in a big way. And I think the reason I had to use that particular example is that for some of you, this is a rainbow community thing, right? And for an even smaller niche group of you, you may be someone like me who identifies as, you know, that way in sexuality, but has moved on from the rainbow sphere because of some of the political things that are happening at the moment. And that is, I want to say that if that's you, that is completely valid and worthy and fine. And you need to take your own journey. And if you need a rest, by all means take it and contemplate what it is that you want from the future and how it is that you can continue to support people like you, but perhaps in a different way than is being peddled to us by the media at the moment, right? because it's become a very complex and corporatized dynamic. And that's all I want to say on that. So then we get the Queen of Pentacles, and we get the first, no, not the first Slayer, I misspoke. The first Slayer who is a victim of Spike, right? The punk figure on the subway, chilling like a definitely not villain. The Queen of Pentacles in reverse can indicate a kind of stopping of abundance, again, a stopping of the giving of resources from this friend. It could also mean that your friend, since having these worries about you, or since you stepped away, is having less of a financial or abundant advantage. They are feeling less like the world is a lucky place for them. And I think that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because they're still in the magic shop. They still have all of these resources around them. They're still presenting as Anyanka, who is very, very... she's a very Capricorn character in the best possible way, and very sort of, as I say, obliviously abundant, right? She does collect the shiny things, and indeed the money exchanged for goods and services, in a way that flows better, almost because she wasn't inducted in the same complex dynamic of negative beliefs about money that we all were. But for some reason, there's a blockage in that with this person. Now, if they're not directly financially blocked, it's just that they feel less abundant in this place, in this world, in this group without you. And there's an interesting thing as well, with me talking sort of much earlier about how victim mindset sort of plays into whether people become activists. And again, not speaking negatively about activism, because I'm very much in your camp if you are involved in those things. But there's an interesting thing with it being the Slayer that appears on the subway, because we only ever see that Slayer, if I'm correct in my memory, we only ever see her in one scene where she's fighting Spike and she loses, right? And this is almost the first time that we're introduced to the idea that somebody can lose who has all of your powers, who has all of your information, who has your strengths. This isn't a warning to you, but I feel like this is how this person is feeling, that there's an element of predation happening. The unseen POV here is not just of the kind of camera on the Slayer, it's of Spike, it's of the predatory gaze towards this person, who is in the end alone on a subway at night, being incredibly vulnerable, no matter what their advantage, no matter what their inducted powers, right? And I think that this is indicative that your friend, through something to do with all of this, actually feels a vulnerability now. They feel that they are also prey. And I don't think that they did when they were hand in hand with you. And the reason I want to kind of bring that back to the original thing that I said is because sometimes if we are very, if we find power dynamics in being very angry within a group or even a duo, and kind of, what I'm hearing is damn the man, save the empire, right? But very sort of fired up about a certain cause, which again can be a Ace of Wands thing, with a collective or with another person. Sometimes when that collective or person is removed or reframed, we can feel all the more vulnerable to the forces that we thought were against us. And that can refer to systemic oppression. It can also refer to just a mindset of everything is against me, which can then devolve into a mindset of why bother, and I speak from experience on that, right? It's funny that this reading is kind of coming up in a week that I've been reading a lot about the psychology of victim mindset and about healing victimhood when you are legitimately under adversity, legitimately oppressed or disabled or, you know, in some way having trouble with the way that things are systemically set up. Because I feel like even if this is a gaming thing and you bonded over fun stuff, there is an element with this person where they had a camaraderie with you that made them feel like less of a victim in their kind of temporary call to arms. And I don't think that's the case now. Excuse me, more confirmation. I think actually this person is feeling quite vulnerable without you. And this is a person who would have been framed as powerful, but the scene that they're appearing in is the only scene they're in, and they're scared they're going to die, right? It's this Slayer and Spike thing again. If this is someone you used to do online gaming with, this could be very literally that their group or your kind of faction or whatever it is up for being slaughtered by other online gamers now, because you're no longer a part of it, and they're kind of pissy about that. But again, that's a very small portion. I think this is more of a broad feeling of being under threat, because I'm a tarot reader who reads emotions a lot more than anything else because of my particular astrological inclinations, etc. Also because we have a Five of Cups reversed under here. Now notice that this is, for you fans, from the episode in season 3, I believe, at the very beginning, where Buffy goes to LA and kind of starts up again, and she is a waitress for a time under a different name, and sort of forgets all about the scoobygang, forgets about her calling, tries to run from it unsuccessfully, and tries to begin again. And I'm not saying that, again, to say that your rest isn't justified, that your flight from this isn't justified. And I don't actually think you are starting again under a different name. But again, I think this person perceives that you're just dropping everything, changing your name, forgetting about who was there for you, and beginning again. And for them, that's a source of grief, which in the end is the meaning of the Five of Cups card, right? It's about processing a loss. It's about looking at the advantageous things as opposed to the negative things. But the difference between this and the traditional kind of Smith-Waite version of the card is that on this, the two upright cups, I mean, one of them's behind her and out of her perception, and the other one is something she's actively about to give to somebody else. So whereas you would have the person gazing at the fallen cups about to turn to the contemplation of the uprights, in the way that this person's perceiving you, it's like the stuff that you have to be happy about within this is almost stuff that they're jealous you'll share with somebody else. So again, whatever interest you had with this person, whatever shared activism, whatever shared identity, I want to say, they feel like you're just going to take the good bit of that and share it with your new fancy friends, instead of it reminding you of them and of the strong connection that you did have. So pretty much all of this is about projection, it's about jealousy, it's about this person feeling competition that they're not willing to acknowledge, it's about this person, bringing their own baggage to the scenario, when really all I can see in terms of the reality of what's happened so far is that you bonded over a shared identity, you were perhaps up in arms about certain similar things, you perhaps had specific hangouts or digital spaces that you were in together, and what's transpired is that you've gone for a rest, and this person's like, it was a phase, you have new fancy friends that you prefer to us, you're not feeling the calling to our shared interests anymore, you've completely changed, you've left me vulnerable, how dare you, all of these other things that are a bit much, right? And part of me wants to say, is the reason you've had a rest because you sensed that all of this was coming from this friend, because you sensed that if you so much as took some time to yourself, their projection would happen to the extent that you felt not even just underappreciated, but actively stink-eyed, bad-mouthed, shunned, rejected, or, as I say, vengeance demon, you felt that this person would want to be punishing you for taking time. And that's why you're hearing it from me, because, again, Buffy's like a very protective character, right? She's very concerned about the welfare of her friends. Even when she runs away from them and tries to start again, it's not really the scoobygang she's running from, it's the angel stuff and the consequences of her calling on her life. Some of you may have taken a break from this friendship because of something romantic that happened that really exhausted you and made you see things in a completely different way. And I don't think that this person is in appreciation of the gravity of that situation, right? This is your becoming part 3. And I don't think they're getting it. I really don't. But what I want to say is that it's okay for you to take that time. And if it's misunderstood, that's because of how compassionate you've been so far. And that it's coming up as Buffy is not just because this is a show about Buffy and you're the protagonist of your own reading. It's also because I'm being pushed to emphasize your instinct to protect other people from what it is that you need. Right? So to what extent is all of this coming up about your friend? Because actually, you're kind of worrying about it more than you're worrying about what this process needs to be for you. Take your fucking time. Work in your diner. Yes, you'll probably get pulled back into whatever it is that you're meant to do. But without that time away at the beginning of season 3, we wouldn't have had up to season 7, right? Again, sorry if you don't watch Buffy. Hopefully this is still making sense anyway. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, yes, it's cheesy as hell if you're under 30, but it's great. It's so good. There's so much in it. Even amongst the cheese, there's so much value, particularly in the later seasons, to the nuances of minor characters, that I would recommend it to absolutely everybody. All right, so we've got Xander as the Fool, and we've got the Sun in reverse with this Buffy-Spike relationship. I think I want to talk about Buffy-Spike first, because Spike's the hidden figure in this, right? So where we had this Slayer feeling that there is a sense of predation now that she's left vulnerable to the Spike of whatever this is. If you don't watch it, just read The Threat, right? We now have a card where Spike is changed, where Spike gains a soul and, massive spoilers, saves the world, right? More so than the person that's actually meant to save it in a way. So the thing that was the major threat to you guys in your banding together, the sort of systemic threat or the perceived threat of other people or whatever it is actually being transmuted at the moment. It's being changed at the moment. Big things are going on for it. And it can be a source of light, of goodness. The change that's happening in a bigger way can be something that is celebrated rather than something that is a direct threat to you or your friend. But this is in reverse, and the Sun in reverse is always about a positive change that is delayed. The Sun card can never be a bad card, right? It's never negative, but sometimes it takes its fucking sweet ass time in getting to a positive place. And if any of you are watching who have ever been identified with the Sun card, you all know that you're never really perceived as a bad thing, but you can be a slowpoke in a way that can be damaging to others. And that's something I'm being told to say. What I get from this is that this isn't just a resistance to you leaving. This is a resistance from this person to the world changing in a broader way. And indeed to the idea that there's not something we have to fight against anymore. The reason I had to say some potentially contentious things about identity politics, etc., in the beginning of this reading is not just, personal conjecture or because those things have been on my mind or something. I would actually say they haven't. It's because this person is not just afraid that you've moved on. They're afraid that the world has. And if they don't have a monster to fight against, or a person to enact vengeance on or for, they lose some of who they are. Which for you, as a Slayer figure, as a person who is, identifying as a spiritual individual, or as a witch, magician, light worker, you fill in the blank, it's not a particularly positive influence to be around, is it? Somebody who needs to fight against something. And when I spoke about phases earlier and about sort of being a teenager and all of those other good things, it's like, yeah, they're fantastic, but we grow out of them, right? Buffy is a thing that will always hold a special place in my heart, but it's something I eventually kind of moved on from obsessing over because I became an adult, right? And in the same way, I think this person is finding it difficult moving on from the shared identity that you both had both as a result of you taking a step back, but also in response to the wider world being different from how they thought it would be at this time. And this will hit all the harder for those of you for whom the shared cause, the shared interests that you had were about the wider world in a political sense, or were about fighting against something that might not be the case in 5-10 years. What do you do when your entire identity is about keeping up fighting the good fight, I want to say, and then you're suddenly in a world where things are harmonious? I think it's a question we need to ask ourselves, particularly at the moment, right? In a broader way. Yes, there's a lot of crazy military stuff going on all around the globe at the minute. Yes, astrologically, things are not looking great for that, right? In terms of conflict, in terms of things getting worse before they get better. But in a broader sense, there is a current of things getting better, and we need to prepare for the eventuality that we don't have to struggle. With this also being a reading that touched on abundance a lot, particularly for this person, there is a theme about struggle, about what one feels they're entitled to and indeed will receive. There's a thing about limiting beliefs for this person and about struggle. And I think in your rest, in your contemplation, even in your dreaming, you're coming to a place spiritually where you're starting to realise that it can be the sun for you. Everything can be bright, everything can be shiny. You don't have to struggle so much, right? You're moving out of a way of being that centred suffering as something to be admired, or a kind of almost a goal of spirituality, or a kind of quality of martyrdom. And you're moving slowly into a paradigm where you can grow and indeed help others through joy, and where it's not necessary to endure in order to bring about really transformational stuff. And I'm hoping if that's you and you've found the channel that you subscribe, because I'm sort of moving that way myself, right? After a long time in victim mindset, after a lot of things going horribly wrong, see former collective chats to sort of figure that out. But it's like I'm realising I don't need to suffer anymore. And I think you're coming to the same thing. And I think that's sometimes disturbing, because we have to leave behind things that centred around self-martyring in some fashion, or being the person that suffers so that someone else can thrive, right? And it's difficult to leave behind that identity when it was so much work. It's so much harder to grow through pain than it is, to sort of live the privileged life that you've been perhaps observing in other people, where they just get by, right? They're Jupiter's kids. They're just moving from one advantage to the next and doing all right and coming to similar realizations. And you had to do it with your friend through not having that great a time, whether that's, sexuality-based, class-based, race-based, or just kind of in the sense of feeling disenfranchised and bonding through perhaps escapist media in some way, because that's what this is, right? Whether it's gaming or not. But you're coming to a place through your rest, through your rejuvenation, where not only are you not growing through suffering anymore, but you kind of don't want to be around it. And this is the thing that your friend's picking up on as a threat. It's not that you're moving on in the sense that you no longer like them or love them. It's that you're moving on in the sense of what you will tolerate as being your daily activity, your hangout, the place where you work for some of you, the place certainly where you do magic, or you practice spirituality, or you discuss ideas. I think you're moving into a friendship space where you want to be around positive people. And man, if this ain't also like my reading / a reading for someone that I know. But it's this thing of they're not being victimized. They're slowly perceiving that self-victimization was their paradigm and that you differ on that, and they're feeling threatened that you differ on that. But I actually don't feel that the connection is any less strong between you. I feel the love is there. So I think it's up to you, really. Once you've kind of brought all of this to light, hopefully through this reading you understand things a bit better in terms of why this person is suddenly a bit passive-aggressive, a bit pissy. You're kind of getting that. And really this reading is less about what they're thinking and more about your decision from here on in of, do I return to this person and sort of maybe try and talk about some of this and maybe help them to sidestep into this place that I'm in where, it might get better for us and we don't have to define ourselves in a place where it doesn't, or in a place where we have to be jealous if the other one moves on or whatever. Or do you leave them where they are in this refusal to expand and let them come to their own conclusions, and kind of meet you later on? Because the other thing about Spike and Buffy is that he comes in and out of the show. And, he comes into it sometimes as a murderer. He comes into it sometimes as an attempted rapist. Spoilers. Other times, he comes into it as her partner. Or as the guy that saves the world. Or as the guy that is the most thoughtful in a thoughtful bunch of friends. It's a very strange and complex dynamic. Some would say he's the most nuanced character, right? I'd argue that, but he's certainly up there. So there's this thing of like, whatever you are to each other, there is a sense that there's a chance to come in and out again and to be something completely different when you do. The Spike that we saw pop in, I even want to say season 1. I don't even think it's season 2, is it? It's like, or maybe it's early season 2, but he pops in with Drew right at the very beginning and sort of sets the rules with the other vamps. And then the guy that we see in the end, that has been the boyfriend of the sorts of people he used to kill, and ends up self-sacrificing in this Christ-like way to save humanity. Like, they're very different characters, and this can be the dynamic between you guys, where this person could transform, or indeed they could see a transformation in you, and yet you're still going to get on, you're still going to be in each other's storylines. The intro that I gave at the beginning of this reading is kind of a new phrase for me, and it's about writing your own story. Because this is the paradigm we're all kind of collectively entering into a bit more, right? It's the vibe I'm feeling on all these channels, and I wanted to express it for my own. So there's something to that, and that's going to influence your decision. Let's move into this Fool energy of Xander. Xander is interesting because he's always stuck by Buffy. And again, he's a very flawed character. He can be a total schmuck, right? And in his relationship to Anya, again, spoilers, I'm really sorry, he leaves her at the altar. He's an absolute douchebag to her. And this is partly because he's an indecisive person. He's never fully sure of himself. I dare say, like, right at the end of the finale of the series, he's still not 100% certain who he is. But that makes him an excellent Fool card because Xander is the most open to new things of all of them. He gets stuck in, he gets involved. He can switch very easily. He is a trickster energy, for those of you who are comfortable with that. And when he's walking through the graveyard with a mace here, in his very season 1, season 2, highly 70s shirt that he's wearing, it sort of makes me think of him being on Buffy's team without ever fully being aware of his own potential. And the thing that is remarkable about him is that he's the most, I don't know, like, he gets depressed, but he still seems like the most upbeat character to me. He's still pretty chipper. Even when shit goes down with his best friend, even when the girl that he's obsessed with rejects him, even when he has to stand somebody else up in a really awful way, his overall mode is the jokester, the prankster, the skater, right? And you've got to remember that when he first introduces himself, episode 1, 1997, doesn't he like do a rail or something? And I feel like he's coming off a rail and there's like lotion playing in the background. I want to say it's Blind for Now. I love Lotion, by the way. That's one of my favourite Buffy bands, but regardless, he kind of sails into the scene as this, oh, I know what your character is. You're that laid-back skater guy who's really horny all the time. And then he develops into so much more from that and becomes quite a crucial component to the group. All of this is relevant because, again, you're looking for upbeat people around you, whether or not they are oblivious to, I don't even want to say higher issues, but to the sorts of issues that you used to discuss with this friend. Xander and Anyanka were inherently incompatible. This is why they didn't end up together in that kind of a way. But there was a pull between them, almost because they kind of come from opposite backgrounds, right? One of them's very vengeancey. The other one puts up with a lot around them, because remember Xander's home life, and kind of just lets it, water off a duck's back is what we say around here. They just kind of shake it off. So there's an interest, there's a pull between people that might be in your new crowd, if you are taking a bit of a side step from this, and your old crowd. But I think you are seeing that they are inherently incompatible. And I think actually the Xander energy is healthier for you right now than the Anya energy, even though Xander can't cover all bases. He's very straightforward in the things that he wants, in the things that he knows about, in the jokes that he makes. He's a kind of safe house, right? He becomes that for the other characters. He's a safe place almost because he's so limited. I know a lot of people who are very into this show, and certainly amongst the older ones of those, Xander is the most hated character because he's seen as fairly one-dimensional or fairly predictable in a schmuck type way. But I almost want to say that's kind of what you need to be around right now. So if this person's judgment of you put you in a position recently where you were finding yourself to be judgmental of your other friends, where you were saying, well, is it right for me to leave this world behind? Is it right for me to hang around with this person who's clearly got a one-track mind and is only about these things, and they're very kind of base pleasures or silly surface stuff? Like, should I be second guessing that? Should I be going back to the other stuff that I was into? My response would be no, because Xander is one of the most loyal characters, if not the most loyal character, to Buffy, right? He doesn't go off and get his own show. He doesn't come in and out like Spike. He doesn't turn neg like Willow, right? He doesn't even go back to England for a time to be with presumably Treadwells like Giles. Hello if you're watching from London. He just is. He's just there. He's flawed and he's there. He fucks up and he's there. He almost gets a bunch of people killed and he's there. But he's still just Xander. He loses the dingy shirts and he loses the skateboard, but he's still the same bro that sailed in on day one. Love him or hate him, right? And that kind of consistency, I want to say, is what is required for you at the moment. Whether or not anybody else around you feels threatened by it is kind of not your issue. There's something else wants to be said. I'm going to get 3 cards for it and cover them very quickly because this was not meant to drag on. What do we want to say about the Buffster's journey from this point? And by the Buffster, I mean you. There's this one. Are you at the end? No, you're in the middle. And there's... Is it you? Yeah. So, sequence of events from here on in. We've got an Ace of Cups. Wow. We've got a 3 of Scythes reversed. And we've got a 5 of Stakes. Okay. There might be some conflict up ahead about this, by the way. 5 of Stakes is a kind of outcome card, is like fighting. And I get the feeling, because this is... it's different from the guidebook, actually, but this is the card of... I think it's when Giles becomes a demon for a day and can't communicate to the others that that's what's happened and feels very awkward. Please correct me if it's not that episode, but that's what I'm getting from this image. So it's like somebody trapped in a different skin that can't communicate why it is that they're doing what they're doing, which I sense is this thing with you trying to communicate to this long-standing friendship. No, you're misunderstanding me. I'm not in demon face right now. There's just some changes happening, right? Ace of Chalices can be a love offer if this was the way you were taking this reading. Whether that's you making one or getting one is kind of up for you based on the situation. But if it's not that, this is just an abundance of love within the friendship sphere. This is an indication not to worry. I'm also noticing that the silhouette of the gravestones is echoed in the Xander card on here. So again, this is like someone around you is being very loving right now, to focus on that. And then with the Three of Swords reversed, this is the end of a heartbreak situation. So I do get that this friend, although they might be confrontational with you, they're going to grow out of it. They're going to grieve this and sort of realise that it wasn't what they thought it was, and then maybe come back to things and join you in this place of your side's card, right, where you were just having a rest. And indeed with Joyce laying on the sofa and then this sleeping card, it's like this is almost the anti-Joyce on the sofa thing, in that it's like we're sleeping, not sleeping in the bigger way, right? We're having a time out, not a death. Again, spoilers, and I do apologise. I will put a thing up actually about this being a Buffy spoiler reading. In the upright, this would be an absolute ending to something, right? It's the saddest moment in the show for many people. And it's the loss of a dynamic which wasn't appreciated at the time. But because it's in reverse, I feel like this is saying this is not the end of this. I don't think you're going to cut off entirely from this person, or if you decide to, because of what I've said, if you sort of do step back for your own replenishing, what I want to say is that this person will transform and come back to you, because they will realise that they're in a less adversarial world than they'd framed themselves as being in. They may even do some direct work with this stuff. And I'm saying that partly because, like I say, I've been doing some reading on this myself. So this is like stepping away from something, realising the framework that you held yourself in was the flawed bit, and then coming back to it once you've healed that framework and you can recognise your friend for who they are and not for how it was that you were seeing them. Because remember as well with this Giles thing, wasn't it like again, I will explain this properly for people who didn't watch it, but I feel like the Giles demon thing was like a spell from Ethan Rain or something. I feel like it wasn't a legit Giles is a demon, and it was something that could be undone fairly easily. But because it was an illusion, other people couldn't get involved to undo it straight away. So it's like the illusion of you going off and doing something that would make this person jealous is just that. It's an illusion, and it's going to be healed, and you're going to be revealed for who you are. And with it being Giles that ends up as who you are rather than Buffy, I like to think of Giles as actually kind of a wiser character than Buffy is. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but there's some seasons I watch it, but I don't watch it for her at all. I don't even like her. I think somewhere around the sort of post-Dawn stuff, I really start to get irritated with her, and particularly when all Spike stuff's going on, I'm just like, you know what, I don't like either of you right now. You're shits. And I watch it for the others. And I feel like with that, it's that Giles is, he's got the steadiness of Xander, but he's got more knowledge and wisdom and intelligence than everybody else in the show put together. And indeed, he is the heart and soul of the magic shop rather than Anya, right? He's the resource. He has been from season 1. When I was speaking earlier about watching the show from when it aired, I remember the trailer coming out in 97 and me sort of being drawn to the knee-high boots and books on demons. And the figure that was in that trailer the most in my country was Giles. It was this old British guy who had all this amazing knowledge, right? And I feel like there's a transformation once you have rested up into you being the sort of knowledge base, wisdom base for a group. Now, whether that's the group that you were in or another group, I don't know. But it's the sense that once this illusion is dispersed, it's going to fast track you to a realm where you are able to inform others or guide others or be a safe place for other people in the way that they once were for you, or in the way that your former hobbies, interests and groups were for you. I'm not saying that you're going to be superior to anyone else. I think that's a very damaging way to frame things. And I'm certainly not saying that like your Giles self is going to be better than your Buffy self. What I am saying is that rest away from this person and time with the Xanders of your world, the people who are a bit more laid back, translates to you moving into a space where actually you become a resource for other people. And in the end on this channel, my goal is not to gateway or gatekeep the magical, but to provide a space where people who are semi-interested in it or who want to develop within it become the resources themselves, right? They travel through whatever shit it is that they needed to travel through, possibly with a bit of my help, and then they sort of become whatever it is that they deep down knew that they wanted to become, but were perhaps a bit scared of, or that other people made them feel a bit iffy about, right? In the end, that's why I read, and it's why I'm very careful about the sorts of readings that I do, increasingly so since the sort of revamping of this channel. So yeah, I think it's a very good outcome. I feel that whatever heartbreak has taken place with this person, they will get over it, but it's a case of them changing their paradigm, and that's not got anything to do with you, nor do I think you can particularly help it. I think if anything, you taking time away is helpful for this person, because they get to look at why it is that you might have done that. And once they travel past jealousy and competition and sort of feeling a bit butthurt about it all and missing you a lot, because this is a card of missing someone as well, they will get into a space where they're ready to reevaluate how they operate. Meanwhile, you will get a lot of love and friendship from the people around you who are a little bit more laid back, a little bit more easy to deal with for now. And you might not be thinking about the same things or doing quite as much work in the outer world as a result, whether that's on a hobby level or like a bigger level. But at the end of it, you're going to come to a place where you are more in line with your purpose. And indeed, everybody that was already friends with you loops back to you in a way that is more coherent, cohesive, and brings you a lot of happiness, a lot of joy, brings them a lot of joy back from their friendship with the renewed you, and means that you're not having to start again, because you've kind of done the transformative thing where instead of rebranding or running away into a new place as this person has projected that you're doing, you're instead integrating everything, right? You are LA Buffy and Sunnydale Buffy, and indeed the Buffy that happens after the show. You are all of the things that you needed to be as a result of the breakdown of a connection which perceived you in a very narrow box. Okay? I hope that's useful to you. If you want to like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. I really appreciate that, because this is a small channel that I want to get big, because this is my main gig. This is my day job. Speaking of that, if you did want to book a more extended reading with me, links are down below. If you want to donate because you enjoyed this one, there's a link to toss me a $5 or whatever for a coffee down there. And if none of that is applicable, but you enjoyed this enough to stay to this point, then thank you, and I hope you have a really lovely day.